Yeah, I've been promising to share this for a while. This is from the Constitution, a Heavenly Banner by Ezra Taft Benson. Um, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's a lengthy excerpt. He gave a talk version of this, then a shorter at BYU, then a shorter talk version at General Conference a year later called Our Divine Constitution. And then I want to say that there was an Ensign article called something like, oh, I can't remember. But anyhow, there's basically four witnesses to this, but this was directed to all members of the church back when he was the prophet, by coincidence at the bicentennial of the Constitution, just like President Oaks is a prophet by coincidence at the 250-year anniversary of Declaration of Independence. Okay, so here we go. These are the, I came up with a way of remembering these five principles. These are five principles, kind of religious principles we have regarding the proper existence of government at all in the first place that we need to consider. And so first off is agency. So I put A for myself, and then RRPP. Agency, then role as in proper role of government, and then rights as in a source of human rights is not government, it is God. And then PP is the people are superior to the governments. In other words, God created people, the people created governments. People are not superior to God, and government is not superior to the people. And then powers, government should only have limited powers. There's very little that we can actually delegate to government. So we'll get into that here in a second here. So I'm just going to read some different excerpts. So the first one, he calls it the principle of agency. The first basic principle is agency. We understand that the purpose of the Council of Heaven was to announce and present the plan of redemption for the salvation of all of God's children. The council was called so that every man and woman could sustain the provisions of Father's plans, which required that all people obtain mortal bodies, be tried and proven in all things, and have opportunity to choose of their own free will to obey the laws and ordinances essential to their exaltation. Now you'll find early on in the talk defending our divinely inspired Constitution that President Oaks says maximum freedom is the best circumstances for people to be tested in this earth life, to match the purposes of this earth life. Now he goes into talking about how Satan sought to amend the plan, and versus Jesus was willing to stick up for the plan and be the sacrifice to atone for sin, and allow for sin, allow for the learning from sin, versus Satan wanted to force everything to be perfect. I am going to read this paragraph here. The central issue in that council, this parallels what President Oaks said about maximum freedom. The central issue in that council then was, shall the children of God have untrammeled agency to choose the course they should follow, whether good or evil, or shall they be coerced and forced to be obedient? And Christ and all who followed him stood for the former proposition. That means we all stood for that, you guys. Freedom of choice. Satan stood for the latter, coercion and force. Because Satan and those who stood with him would not accept the vote of the council, but rose up in rebellion, they were cast down to the earth, where they have continued to foster the same plan. The war that began in heaven is not yet over. The conflict continues on the battlefield of mortality, and one of Lucifer's primary strategies has been to restrict our agency through the power of earthly governments. Once again, let me read that again. And one of Lucifer's primary strategies has been to restrict our agency through the power of earthly governments. Proof of this is found in the long history of humanity. Now, he then talks about the theocracy that established at Adam's time, and then how early on the descendants of Adam began to rebel against the setup and push for their own authoritarian views, such as Nimrod and Napoleon and others. Okay, so agency, very important. The war in heaven, by the way, so you may have seen me doing some back and forth with a guy recently who is trying to tell me I need to read all these books and what have you, as though I'm not reading plenty of books already, and accusing, basically trying to mock the church. It is what it is. I'm just calling him out. And if you're watching this video, hey man, please, I think I gave you my case easy enough. Okay, but I brought up the Native American teachings, and I'll bring it up again. Why is it the Navajo have such a similar teaching about this premortal existence and battle when they come from a completely separate part of the planet. Okay? The witness testimony, the whole earth speaks to us, the witness testimony. This did happen. We were there, and it happened. And the whole earth knew this at one time or another. Okay? The second basic principle, the proper role of government. Second basic principle concerns the function and proper role of government. I should like to outline in clear and concise and straightforward terms the guidelines that determine now and in the future my attitudes and actions towards all domestic proposals and projects of governments. Okay, so here's what they are. 1, I believe that governments were instituted of God for the benefit of man, and that he holds men accountable for their acts in relation to them. Whether we promote good things or uphold good things or etc. Think about it. I believe that no government can exist in peace except such laws are framed and held inviolate as will secure to each individual the free exercise of conscience, the right and control of property, and the protection of life. It cannot exist in peace without protecting those 3 things. I believe that all men are bound to sustain and uphold the respective governments in which they reside, which, while protected in their inherent and inalienable rights by the laws of such governments. So it's an important little conditional aspect, right? I talk about powers and stuff like that in the Constitution. I say that some of them are straight up powers and others of them are conditional. Others of them are prohibited. Others of them are conditionally prohibited, right? What's this? What's the conditions here? I believe all men are bound to sustain and uphold the respective governments in which they reside while protected in their inherent and inalienable rights by the laws of such governments. Okay, so again, my little way of remembering this is ARRPP. So agency, rights, agency, role, rights, people, and then powers. Okay. So now what does President Benson teach us? The source of human rights. The third important principle pertains to the source of basic human rights. Thomas Paine, back in the days of the American Revolution, explained, rights are not gifts from one man to another, nor from one class of men to another. It is impossible to discover any origin of the rights otherwise than in the origin of man. It consequently follows that rights appertain to man in right of his existence, and must therefore be equal to every man. Probably one of the biggest defenses, by the way, of freedom of speech and the Second Amendment. Look at our first several amendments, okay? A human is a human is a human is a human. Okay? The great Thomas Jefferson asked, can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God, that they are not to be violated, but with his wrath. There will be consequences when we begin to lose this conviction. And that's what I tried to tell this guy who was chatting with me back and forth. There will be natural consequences if you continue to mock these attitudes. The feelings of these great men, in keeping with the revelations of God through his prophet, who said, men are free according to the flesh, and they are free to choose liberty and eternal life, or to choose captivity and death. Okay, so this is God set up our liberty. So again, his plan was agency. The plan doesn't work without maximum freedom, as President Oaks said. And government has a proper role. It's set up by God to protect our rights, particularly life, liberty, and control of property, right? And we are bound to uphold them while we're protecting those rights, and we are accountable for their actions when we, say, for example, we propose, promote, legislate, endorse, enforce anything that's good, that is proper, and we're going to keep looking at this list, versus when we endorse and enforce something that violates these natural laws or these eternal laws, right? So we should be very careful, and we should definitely know the Constitution and understand, because if you are violating the written text of the Constitution, the written consent of the Constitution, and promoting that idea, giving your implicit consent, but then having it enforced through excessive force, the actual diligent reader of the Constitution, who thinks they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, finds it impossible to truly know how to follow God, because they're looking follow what's the right role of government, because they're looking, where is it in the Constitution that this is allowed? Where's that? This isn't making sense. What am I supposed to do as a citizen, right? 90% of the people going along with implicit consent is not okay. You have to write it down. You have to make it knowable to the diligent seeker. Otherwise, you are creating secret combinations and hidden combinations, okay? And I've gone into this plenty of times before, okay? People are superior to governments, okay? So people, that's the ARRP, agency, role, rights, people, and then powers. So the fourth basic principle we must understand is that people are superior to governments they form. Since God created people with certain inalienable rights, and they in turn created government to help secure and safeguard those rights, it follows that the people are superior to the creature they created. We are superior to the government, and the government should remain superior to government and should remain master over it, not the other way around. Government is nothing more nor less than a relatively small group of citizens who have been hired, in a sense, by the rest of us to perform certain functions and discharge certain responsibilities we have authorized. It stands to reason that the government in itself has no innate power nor privilege to deny anything. It only has the source of authority, power, and power is from the people who have created it. This is made clear in the preamble of the Constitution of the United States, which reads, "We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." Okay? And I keep saying there are 3 additional branches that you find in the Constitution. They're abdicating their duty. There's the 3 shadow branches, secret combination branches that don't belong there. And then if you go Article 4 and 5, it's the states. Article 6 is the officers of government. Study the Milgram experiment if you want to understand why that's so important. And then Article 7 plus the Bill of Rights is the people. And we have that peaceably assemble. That's a pretty important power. Okay, petition for redress of grievance. Okay, moving on here. Governments should have limited powers. So we're in that last P that I mentioned. The final principle that is basic to our understanding of the Constitution is that government should have only limited powers. The important thing to keep in mind is that the people who have created their government can give to the government only such powers as they themselves have in the first place. Obviously, they cannot give that which they do not possess. That's why we call them delegated powers, okay? So that's 10th Amendment. Look at that up, okay? So the question boils down to this. What powers properly belong to each and every person in the absence of the prior establishment of any organized form of government? Those are the only legitimate powers of any government. If they naturally exist with people, then they naturally can be delegated. Okay? In the primitive state, there is no doubt that every individual would be justified in using force if necessary for defense against physical harm, against theft, against the fruits of his labor, against enslavement by another. Indeed, the early pioneers found that a great deal of their time and energy was spent defending all 3, defending themselves, their property, and their liberty, in what was properly called the lawless West. Okay? I'm going to move on here. They hire a sheriff, and the sheriff, they can only delegate to him what the power they have themselves. I'm going to go ahead and kind of tell a story he's told in the proper rule of government before. He says, say for example now, that sheriff looks and says that Joe down the road, who's one of the people who hired me to protect him, doesn't have a horse, and Jimmy over here, down this road over here, has 6 horses, and he's also hired me to protect him. And I think it's not fair that Jimmy has these 6 horses and Joel has no horses. So I go to Jimmy and say, give me 2 horses to take to Joe, right? Is that a power that in nature I would naturally have? If not, then government does not naturally have that power. Okay? That's the truth of it. Not local government, not state government, not the federal government. No level of government. I've made a video on this topic before about the concept of harm. And Dallin H. Oaks gave a great talk, one that I highly recommend looking up, from back in 1987, called Freedom and Free Agency, where he talks about the concept of self-harm and eccentricities. But in general, I give some examples too, where, say for example, Joe now has his sewage leaking down into the stream, which is going into Jimmy's property, and now he's making Jimmy's people sick. Yes, the sheriff's entitled to absolutely intervene. Okay, this is common sense. Or Joe likes to ride his horses, at 60 miles an hour past where Jimmy's kids are playing in the street. Absolutely, right? Absolutely, the sheriff's entitled to do something about that. However, to redistribute from Joe to Jimmy, nope, no. So, okay. Um, he quotes the Alabama Constitution, which I really want to get into one of these days, the disaster of the 14th Amendment. I can't remember the case, Alabama versus somebody, regarding state constitutions. Talk about the total improper role of government. But we've got, and that deals with the secret combination, three eagle heads, Great and Abominable Church, things like that I've talked about. So I'll make the video on the Great and Abominable Church. I'll read the Elder H. Further Anderson book real soon here on that for everyone. Since I kind of got bogged down on Nephi's vision. But this is what President Oaks quotes from President Benson from the Alabama Constitution. The sole object and only legitimate end of government is to protect the citizen in the enjoyment of life, liberty, and property. And when the government assumes other functions, it is usurpation and oppression. And that is endorsed by President Benson. That comes from the Alabama Constitution. So when you start prioritizing other things besides protecting life, liberty, and property of the citizens who protect, which again, the horses running down the road ridiculously fast past the kids, that's a protecting life issue. The reckless treatment of sewage and water supply, that's a life protection issue. So let's not be so clueless as to how these things can be expanded out. So again, I recommend the talk Freedom and Free Agency by Dallin H. Oaks, back when he was only an apostle for 3 years at the time. And he does say in his talk, Defending Our Divinely Inspired Constitution, the most important years for understanding the Constitution of his last 37 years as an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, responsible to study the Constitution and its importance in God's plan, right? And boy, it shows. Man, that talk is fantastic. But still the same, what an amazing man he was when he gave that talk back in 1987. And I really recommend it. Freedom and Free Agency. So again, I do really recommend this. If you can ever get a copy of this book, by the way, you will have a better sense of what I call the secret combination, or the three eagle heads, or whatever, because he doesn't use those terms, but he doesn't need to. For me, as a diligent Constitution student, I can't help but see three categories of things that are a massive secret combination. You cannot find them in the Constitution, and we're upholding them. We are upholding them. And that tells me why that's part of what tells me they're the secret combination, because the secret combination is something the Nephites upheld. Okay, it wasn't some cloak and dagger thing. So I would recommend this, and you will develop a real sense of, God's view regarding the Constitution. And then read the Book of Mormon and keep applying it, like President Benson said too, and keep listening to President Oaks right now. I mean, he's a great prophet for this topic. But again, ARRPP, so agency, role, rights, so the proper role of government, rights are God-given, people are superior to government, P, right, and then P again, which is limited powers, because you can't delegate powers to government, which you yourself don't have. How can you delegate that which you do not have? Okay, so, all right, thanks for listening, guys. See you.